This is the left versus the right. I'm James Flippin, representing the right of the political spectrum. And then here with me today, as always, former Governor David Paterson, a little left of center these days. Governor Paterson, how are you?
I'm fine, and I'm representing the right because I am right when I do things.
You're representing the correct.
Correct. I'm representing the correct right
In
now.
essence, you're suggesting I'm already wrong. So we're off to a good start. We're hitting the ground
absolutely.
running. And that's a good thing. So, Governor, nice to be back with you. And, of course, this is a week in which you were featured prominently in the headlines and the news coverage because your status as a prominent Democrat and as a former governor of New York has come into play with this ongoing mayoral race. And now that we're past the primary, Zohran Mamdani with the D next to his name on the ballot, you've got a couple of prominent former Democrats, or I guess Cuomo still is one, I don't know, that are running as independents. And then Jim Walden as an independent, and of course our good buddy Curtis Sliwa running as a Republican. So I wanted to talk with you, if that's okay, just kind of about what it's like to be at the center of this whole political maelstrom, and you're kind of the fulcrum of all this pressure that's being put on various people to react or do something in some way amid this ongoing mayor's race.
Well, as the pressure mounted last weekend, and then I had a conversation with our great owner, John Catsimatidis, I thought that it would be a good idea to go out and just suggest that if Eric Adams and former Governor Andrew Cuomo wind up staying in the race, that there's no way that they can beat Zohran Mamdani. There's no way they can do it. And John agreed with me. We decided to have a press conference. Judge Richard Weinberg joined us, and that was basically the whole point, that perhaps we could find a time between now and the election, and this was actually, to be fair, Mr. Jim Walden's idea, that we would have a consolidation of the polls that were out there at the time and come to an agreement about which candidate was ahead. If there was any money raised at that time for this purpose, they would get the money and the other candidate would drop out, or the other two candidates would drop out. This did not include Curtis Sliwa because he's running on the Republican line. And it really doesn't include Walden because he also is running on another independent line. So we had the press conference and we made this suggestion. It didn't go over well with people who were supporting Zohran Mamdani because they just feel that these are the Democrats that didn't like the result of the primary now trying to influence the general election.
Well, let me just stop you right there. I mean,
well,
do you
wait,
think
James, let me just say this. That's not a bad criticism. In other words, oh, you all didn't win the primary, and now you're trying to find a way to win the general election. I think that the purpose of the press conference were the comments and remarks and promises that Mr. Mamdani has made that has frightened a number of New Yorkers, particularly people of the Jewish community. But I'm not Jewish. I was offended by it myself.
I mean, I guess in essence, do you think that there's any fairness? Because, of course, I want to ask you about the political calculus behind whatever tea leaves you're interpreting with this 5-person race right now. But do you think it's kind of fair to say that both Mayor Adams and former Governor Cuomo are sort of the sore loser Democrats right now? Like, in essence, Adams has announced that he's running as an independent. You know, he did take a bend a little bit to the right on the immigration issue in working with the Trump White House. Cuomo has sort of tried to position himself as the hawk on crime, and so it's taking him maybe toward the center and maybe an independent line. But they both kind of stick out as sore thumbs as the people who were trying to get the Democratic side, maybe not Adams specifically because he jumped into the race kind of late, and then all of a sudden they're still sticking around.
Well, let's remember that Mayor Adams never ran in the Democratic primary this year. He already announced that he was running as an independent.
Right. So I mean, he was a Democrat for some 30, 40 years or whatever
he was
once a Republican, I guess.
Right, but he was not in that primary. Now, Andrew Cuomo, who was in the primary and lost to Mamdani, he feels that he was beaten by the turnout. He was 15 points ahead in the polls. There were 2 weeks to go. Mm-hmm. And as he said to me, when you're 15 points ahead in the polls and it's 2 weeks to go, what you want to do is not get in any trouble. Don't offend anybody. Don't do anything that brings the numbers down. And he followed that strategy. But what he now understands is that the turnout was so demonstrably higher than anyone had guessed or even ventured to believe that it propelled Mamdani to victory. So in answer to your question, I don't think that the two candidates are sore losers. I think that they still see a pathway to win. I'm just trying to tell them that as long as the other is in each of their pathways, they will both lose.
Okay, let me ask you this. Let me put it to you this way, because I'm curious the way that you have been analyzing the race, and this is James Flippin. He's former Governor David Paterson. We're talking about the mayor's race right now here on the left versus the right. You basically said, judging the situation, you feel as though with Cuomo and Adams in, it guarantees a Mamdani victory. Is that something that you're looking at from like a political theory perspective, or are you actually basing that on some sort of poll data that you're looking at?
I'm basing that on the numbers that came out in the primary. Mamdani received such strong support on the Democratic line that someone's going to have to cut into that support and offer an alternative to what his thinking is. And on the other hand, that's basically...
Now, why does it have to be somebody like Adams or Cuomo? Why can't it be a Curtis Sliwa? In other words, I think it's a pretty stark contrast between somebody who markets themselves as a socialist and someone who at least is running as a Republican. Certainly not a super, not the most right-wing person of all time, Curtis Sliwa, but generally speaking, he does present himself as a foil to Mamdani.
I put it this way. Curtis Sliwa ran for mayor in 2021. People laughed at him. I was one of them. I remember being asked by Frank Morano on the Cats Roundtable, what would it take for Curtis to win? And I said, an earthquake, and he's the only survivor. So I gave him a hard time in 21. Now I have to say this. His 28% from 2021, if he just gets that same 28%, that could be a big problem because now there are 4 candidates in the race who could get 25% or over. And I don't think he wants to get mixed up in any, deals about Mamdani. He can win on his own on the Republican Party if the numbers fall right for him.
And it is pretty interesting to think about the race for 30%, is 30% going to be, because for those who are uninitiated, the general election in November isn't going to follow any of that ranked choice voting stuff.
Thank goodness.
Exactly. It's just a race to the finish line when it's all said and done and you stop counting who has the most votes. So, Curtis, and it's interesting to note, when he ran last time, he obviously was one of 2 choices, and Adams won rather handily. But do you think the additional entrance on the left of center side, so you've got obviously the Cuomo, the Adams, Mamdani all the way over to the left, Walden, who generally speaking, I think is kind of left of center. Do you think that whole electorate, the Democrat electorate, is going to be split in some way 4 ways? From what you're hearing right now, the people that you talk to, right, Democrats, is there any level of enthusiasm for a Cuomo or an Adams, or is it just like, well, we'd rather not vote for Mamdani? What are you hearing from people on kind of your end of the spectrum, so to speak?
What I would say is your question is very incisive, and it really cuts to the issue of what's going on here. In this case, Curtis Lee, with a Republican, is trying to play on the right what Mamdani is giving voters on the left. In other words, the more that they crowd into each other, the more I have a chance to run right by them. That's what Curtis Lewa's theory is. And I'll say twice on this show when I was hosting it, he and I went through the numbers and it made sense, but no one expected that the election would get turned upside down by Mr. Mamdani. And, what would be great for Mr. Mamdani is if he would stop for a minute, think about the things he said, go back and talk to some of the people he's offended. I've been in politics, I guess, for 40 years now. I've had to apologize to a lot of people for things I said, but he doesn't seem to want to do that, and that's why I thought there was an opening to challenge his credibility in addition to his candidacy.
Well, yeah. Obviously, I would agree with you on that, Governor Paterson, because the way I feel about Zohran Mamdani is that he's basically everything that's wrong with the Democrat Party right now, with what's developing as the voter base amongst the Democratic Party. I mean,
I'll give you an example of why what you said is so right. One of his supporters said to me, "Why do you keep criticizing him for something he said 5 years ago?" What he said 5 years ago was after the riots in Minnesota and the whole issue over George Floyd and that summer. Mamdani said, it's unfortunate that it happened, but it had to happen. It was something that had to happen for us to get justice. So in other words, after what Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd, we needed more violence. We needed more people to get hurt. That's not an answer. And the other thing is, if he said it 5 years ago and he hasn't corrected it up to now, then I'll just keep repeating it because it's honest and it's true, and he won't admit to it. The same source told me that people from the Mamdani campaign are going to meet with leaders of the Jewish community. First of all, they'll have to get the meeting, which I think will be difficult to do. And then secondly, it better be a big explanation for some of the rhetoric that has really raised the ire of all other citizens around the city, as it would have been even if he was talking about Mexicans or black people.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though, Governor. I mean, look, with all due respect, I don't think that it is going to raise the ire of the average New Yorker. I think if you think about the stuff that Zohran Mamdani is about, the reason he has no interest in correcting the record, so to speak, or apologizing or changing anything is because it's what he actually believes. And it's what he actually puts forth as his policy positions. Get rid of the cops. They're evil and racist and actually are a drain on society. Ding. I think most Democrats would probably agree with that these days. We should have free buses and nobody should actually have to pay for transit around the town. Boom. I totally agree with that one.
That'll work for 3 days because no one will clean the buses.
I understand that.
And that will be the end of busing.
Of course, I agree with you on that. But that's not the way most Democrats nowadays in 2025 look at it. BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction. We hate Israel. Israel's an apartheid state. It's a racist colonizer. Ding. Most Democrats agree with that one. So this guy has no motivation or need to change anything that he's saying. It's in line with the voter base. I hate to say it. I know it's like a read 'em and weep type situation. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's reality.
Well, what he took advantage of that he didn't even know is that of the 5 issues that were most important to the voters, anti-Semitism was not one of them. I wish that it was, but it was not one of them. And so therefore, when people were voting on transportation issues, property tax issues, and other issues away from those subjects, that's where he picked up a lot of votes, because the issue of how he is treating one particular community is, in my opinion, is not coming up enough, because I think it's outrageous.
It is outrageous, but I mean, he's also a guy who talked about that you need to raise taxes on white neighborhoods, and has said that, the concept of accumulated wealth is somehow offensive or whatever. I mean, the guy's basically Karl Marx. I mean, he's basically totally in line with the Marxist teachings that have been brought forth, all these elite schools and colleges and all, and he's a byproduct of that.
Well, getting back to what you said before, James, I agree with you about the Democratic vote, because what caused him to win the primary was the immense, this wasn't just an uptick. This was an immense number of younger people, mostly 25 to 40, even younger people who just got to the voting age of 21 were out there. I'm sorry, the voting age is 18. We're out there voting for him. And I get the feeling that some of them were voting for him just because they're angry. They haven't read, 3 or 4 articles about some of the things he's actually said or done. But there are times in life, and I think we've all gone through this, whatever race or whatever origin we have, where somebody appears to be standing up for us when no one else is, and you flock to them. Only down the road do you find out who they really are, like in Animal Farm or some of the other great
It's a great
books.
point. You're absolutely right about that. But I mean, again, you made the point just a few minutes ago saying that, well, it might sound great to have free buses, but then what happens when they're not repaired? What happens when they're not cleaned? What happens when there's homeless people living in them 24/7? That's not going to be great. People have a hard time connecting the dots between reality and what they think should be when it comes to the world.
And that's what I think happened in this particular primary. And I've got to tell you, James, I remember the primary, and I remember the mayor's race, believe it or not, in 1965 when John Lindsay won. He was a Republican, but kind of as a moderate. And he won again as a coalition candidate in 1969. And it was his ability to make the public understand what things would be like if the Democrat beat him.
Yeah.
And he was able to do it. And he was able to do it. And he wasn't one of these people that didn't work hard and, was really one of our more interesting mayors during his tenure.
And he's come up a lot lately because obviously he won that second term as an independent coalition candidate, as you said, and kind of, that's become relevant now with these three independents.
And he also had the Liberal Party. Boy, I wonder where they went.
Yeah. Well, but look, that's the word liberal, progressive, leftist, whatever term you want to use. The thing is, you had Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania this week, Governor, basically saying, oh, these kind of people who support Zohran Mamdani, they're not even Democrats. They're not even Democrat. Well, I hate to break it to you. Whatever the term is for the parties, things are extremely polarized right now.
I must say, I was very pleased that Senator Fetterman, who was always challenged over his health issues, and that was how they were trying to beat him, that not only did he win, but he said something that I think almost all the people that voted for him and a lot of the people that didn't vote for him appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that he has been a guy who, generally speaking, is trying to come to the center and find some way to govern and find some way to strike compromise in the halls of Congress. Not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. But the reality on the ground is that there is no center. There's people all the way over to the left. There's people all the way over to the right, and they're the ones that are paying attention in terms of politics right now. Anybody else who's not really paying attention, they could be swayed. They could be convinced to vote for this person or vote for that person, maybe, especially when the cult of personality with Donald Trump's not involved. But the majority of the people are not picking these one-off issues and saying, who should I vote for based off this or who should I vote for based off that? A lot of the people motivated to get up and vote, it's because they truly believe in a lot of this stuff, identity politics. If it's on the left, it's a lot of anger and resentment tied into economics. The stories that have been told about accumulations of wealth and all this kind of stuff. And then on the right, it's a lot of the rejection of this growth of government, growth of services that are provided by a government that increasingly doesn't have the money to provide it. And in the case of New York City, that's exactly what we're looking at. You want to provide free buses. Where's the money coming from? New York City is broke. Albany is broke. People are moving to the Carolinas and Florida and Virginia. What do you think is going to happen with Zohran Mamdani? You think there's going to be more people around to pay all the taxes to provide all these services? No, it's going to go the other way. And the more you have regulation, the more market dynamics go away, and there is no middle market. There is no dynamic pricing. It's just poor people and rich people and nothing else. And you had Bill de Blasio that supposedly said he was going to fix it. Well, guess what? Now you've got the Muslim Bill de Blasio. Because that's all this is. Zohran Mamdani is the Muslim Bill de Blasio. That's it. And unfortunately, Eric Adams was the black Bill de Blasio until he got indicted. And then he tried to cosplay as a conservative. So this is the situation we find ourselves in. And Governor Paterson, I'd love to ask you when we come back, just on a personal level, what it's like to be sort of someone that's being looked at as a voice of reason, somebody who's supposed to fix this, somebody who's supposed to be a part of this whole. We'll get into it. He's when Governor Paterson.
Back, I'll fix it.
I'm James Flippin, the left versus the right. Here on the left versus the right, he is Governor David Paterson, former governor of New York, who is representing the left, and I'm James Flippin. On the right, you hear me doing the news updates throughout the week, news director here now at 77 WABC, but sitting in on the talk show chair right now because we're talking about the mayor's race, Governor Paterson's role in this as someone who is a respected Democrat, a respected politician, a guy who carries weight when he suggests things or tries to pull things together on the political side. So, Governor Paterson, what's that like personally, right? Like, do you feel a lot of pressure right now with this role that you're playing? Is it almost kind of fun and exciting, I guess, to be kind of back in the mix in that respect? Or is it just where you want to do the right thing and you're trying to do it the best you can?
First, the bad news. I don't know how people found my phone number, my wife's phone number, my stepson, who works right here at WABC, Anthony, they found his phone number, and these horrible, nasty, vicious messages that they left after the press conference on Monday. Now, I got this, when I was in office. But when I first was in office, I was single at the time, so I didn't care what people wrote to me. But the furor that people have over these types of issues, and most of them didn't get their facts straight, and one of them wrote to me as David Paterson, and they had 3 T's. Now,
3 T's?
3 T's.
It's not even 2.
It's not even 2. And I wish this person would come forward, because I'd really like to meet someone who has an IQ of 30 who did something like that. But moving along, James, it's really a good question, because you want to try to maintain your friendships and your relationships with people, and you want to do things that people are proud of, and a lot of people were very proud of what the owner, Mr. Katzimatidis, and the Judge Weinberg, and myself, and others who had met before we had that press conference. But you do start to feel a little tinge of disbelief when people have such strong points of view and they have no facts or information to support it. I could sit here all day with you, a very informed person. We could take a number of issues that we disagree on. We could go back and forth probably for 3 or 4 hours. Who needs 1 hour for the left and the right? Do you hear that, management? But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that we are human beings. We do get affected by things people say,
especially when it's involving members of your family and stuff like that. I mean, that's ridiculous.
And I even got some letters from people. I don't even know. I used to live in New York. I used to like you. I can't believe that you would get up and make this statement. Well, we'll see how they believe when New York goes bankrupt, because the new leadership didn't really know how to manage a financial crisis.
Yeah, I mean, it's really. Now, I don't know, you might not want to answer this, and that's okay, but is it safe to say that you're in some level of contact with the different candidates here? I mean, do you have a relationship with all 5 of the people that are running at this point, or contact with any of them? Or
I only really know Curtis, and I know Andrew, and I know Eric. I don't know the other 2 candidates. I haven't talked directly to Mayor Adams, but I've talked to some people who are with him. I've talked to former Governor Cuomo a few times, about a week ago. And what I would say is that they all seem convinced that the others should get out of the race.
So you don't get the sense that any of them are really truly kind of taking this idea seriously, that maybe we should try to read the tea leaves and figure out which one of us should or shouldn't be involved here? Like, you think that the 5 of
James,
these people
I will say that the personal experience, I started mapping out how I was going to run for re-election as governor. And of course, I wasn't elected the first time. So, I really wanted this to get right, but I kept running into these situations where someone accused me of doing this, someone accused me of doing that. And finally, the crescendo in the media of these accusations put me in a position where, as much as it hurt my soul, I had to withdraw from the 2010 gubernatorial race. And even talking about it now, I still get a pinch in my stomach from it, because I didn't do anything wrong, and the investigations completely cleared me. It wasn't like with Adams where they dropped the charges. I was completely cleared in the Attorney General, who happened to be Mario Cuomo's investigation. Now, the reason that I point that out is I'm now seeing that in the other candidates. They all work really hard, no matter what you think about them. They get up early in the morning. They go to subway stops. They go to places where they know the public will be, supermarkets. They'll do it on Saturday morning. They'll do it late Sunday night. People come out of the movie theater and you see the gubernatorial candidate. That might be a vote, some votes you pick up. having already done that amount of work up to now, it's very hard to hit the switch and say, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to dinner with my family tonight, and you all settle it.
Well, but it's interesting when you say that, because it feels like in other races that we've covered or paid attention to, whether you're just a fan of politics or obviously a voter, whatever, it happens all the time, right? Like in the presidential primary run-up, people any given day say, all right, that's that. I'm only drawing around 1%, less than 1%, 5%, whatever it is.
Well, if I can interrupt for just a second, James, part of that are people who get into that race so you can see their name and see their face a few times, because they know within 3 weeks they will be history.
That's true. And I think that what's interesting about this particular situation is what we're talking about with the race at hand is, let's just handicap it really quickly, right? So obviously Zohran Mamdani has no reason to drop out, and he won't drop out. He's the Democratic nominee. He's 33 years old. He's a politician on the rise, state senator or state assemblyman, whichever one it is. And so he's in the throes of his political career. He's, obviously going to take this to the end. Andrew Cuomo, I don't know where he goes from here after this, except if he wants to write another book, get some show on TV or the radio, or maybe serve as a political consultant or something like that. Eric Adams, kind of a similar thing. Maybe he can get back into state politics. I don't know. But these are guys, Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, who had very clear designs, I think anyway, on eventually running for president. So whether or not that's kind of maybe gone now remains to be seen, but it feels like they have nothing to lose right now. Like there's no reason for them to drop out. I understand that there's this whole idea from a sort of altruistic perspective, like, don't you care about New York City? But I mean, come on, Governor. I mean, that's not, most of these politicians are not exactly looking at it that way.
James, that's the part I left out. Yes, they care about New York City, but when I described everything they go through, when you've gone through that amount of an effort where you're dragging yourself in at night and your family members said, we told you shouldn't have done this in the first place. You have to listen to all this stuff. You get so focused on what you're trying to accomplish that you literally will just run over anyone that you think is in your way.
Yeah.
And I think that, so with Andrew Cuomo, one of the problems I think he had in this race is he ran for governor in 2002. He was losing by 30 points to Carl McCall. He gets out of the race. It's like a boxing match where the guy's losing, and then he just walks out of the ring like Sonny Liston did to Muhammad Ali. It just doesn't. It just exactly no mas. It's exactly what people don't like. So then Mr. Cuomo runs back in 2006. He doesn't have an opponent there. 2010, when I get out, he has no opponent. 2014, no opponent. 2018, no opponent. 2021, he leaves, and now he comes back. This is the first time he's been in a real competitive primary in his life. And I think that some of the decisions he made could have been rethought. But I did think he was right when he said when you're up by 15 points and you have 2 weeks to go, you're just trying not to offend anybody.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the thing I would also say is, what does that even really mean these days? I mean, these polls, do we trust these polls? I mean, are they calling people's landlines? Are they texting people to get these answers? Are they actually knocking on people's doors?
It's a good question, James. I don't really know where they get the answers.
I don't think there's too many people out there listening right now, Governor, who say, I love these polls.
I think I was called for a poll. I was called for a poll a couple of months ago before the primary took place for a candidate, and I was actually supporting the other candidate, and I told the pollster that, and then I got the feeling that the pollster wasn't really a pollster. They were working for the other candidate.
Yeah, all of a sudden, you're hearing the click-clack and so when I said, in the background. Yes,
by the way, you don't have to answer this question, but if you're working for that person, please tell them I have a great deal of respect for them, but I'm supporting their opponent. And he said, thank you. And I said, by the way, I'm Governor David Paterson. but in all seriousness.
Yeah, sure you are.
That's a real, exactly.
I also just wanted to note, by the way, that poor Roberto Duran with the no mas. He was actually a very good boxer. And he was remembered, unfortunately, for the no mas against Sugar Ray Leonard. But he was actually a great boxer. So I just want to throw that out there.
Oh, no, he was a great boxer.
Yeah.
I didn't think I thought he could lose in a decision, but I didn't think he would ever get knocked out like a TKO, something like that.
Well, you know what? We also didn't think that we'd be talking about Zoran Mamdani at the front end of the ticket. So, it's always things changing all the time. But all right, well, look, I'm curious. I don't know if you're going to want to wait in on this or not, but in terms of the available polling data, for lack of anything else to point to or look at, Adams consistently is the one amongst these guys that's kind of coming in last. I guess maybe Jim Walden. I honestly don't know. Maybe Jim Walden's polling a little bit lower than him amongst the five.
Apparently so.
And then also our good buddy Curtis Sliwa will always tell you, well, the negatives, the strongly negatives, the people that really can't stand people, that Adams doesn't do so well with that category either. I mean, do you continuously see a path for Adams at this point? I understand that on Monday you didn't really necessarily want to chime in on like who should be the one that gets the pressure point right now, but do you still see a campaign path forward for Adams?
I think because of the fact that Adams was out of action and he's only gotten back into the action since the primary, which would be the day after June 24th, I think it takes 2 to 3 months, a couple of months, I'd say, toward the end of August into September. I think he's the one who's the most interesting candidate running right now. If he can regain some of the great support he got in 2021, he could be a factor. I'm not saying he's going to win, but he's got an upside. Also, he hasn't spent that much money. Andrew Cuomo spent $25 million to get beaten in the primary. Adams, I am sure, is sitting on some money that he will get on television and have his message heard. But I'm going to flip the switch for a second. If he doesn't achieve that by September 1st, and it looks like we're going to have a Mayor Mamdani, if you were in position, do you think you'd make that phone call and ask one of those candidates to get out of the race?
In September?
Yeah, because I'm going to be busy then.
I'd be happy to call up both Cuomo and Adams and say, get the heck out. Let my boy Curtis run against Mamdani. Let's figure this one out. No, I mean, look, I think that the intricacies of the whole thing are profound. And you have this thing that's going on right now where Adams, dating back to really last weekend, wanted to draw attention to this Columbia University, your alma mater, application where basically it was said that Mamdani is both African American and black and yet also Asian. And then Adams tried to jump on that and maybe he's going to play the identity politics. I just don't. I think that the Democrat voter, the young, energized, passionate Democrat voter who believes a certain type of way about economics and property rights and identity politics and all this, I don't think they're going to vote for Adams just because he's black when Zoran Mamdani is a POC, a person of color, right? I mean, it checks the boxes that way, and he's got a lot of other good stuff going for him. Not a Trump surrogate or whatever, not going to be pushing for deportations or whatever. I just don't see where anybody's going to favor these other guys as opposed to Zoran Mamdani, provided they're of that political ilk.
I must tell you, James, I am a very good friend of Eric Adams. I am, until this primary, I've supported him for everything he ran for. And I probably only didn't support him in the primary because when he said he was now running as an independent in a general election, I didn't see any chance for him to win there. So I picked a candidate, Andrew Cuomo, in the primary. But I say all that to say this. I didn't really like that particular criticism of Mr. Mamdani. I mean, I know it's the apocalypse. I know he's the evil force of evil, but
people are grasping at straws.
He's a 17 or 18-year-old kid. He's biracial. Who knows what he thought about how he identified himself that way? He filled out an application that apparently didn't have enough places to explain who you actually are. And I just didn't think a person who is as well achieved as Mayor Adams, he's been a mayor and he's been a leader around the city. I thought that was reaching back and taking a little bit of a cheap shot at what a college kid did years ago.
All right.
Because if Mr. Adams would like to go back to Columbia and look at some of the things I did, he'd have a lot more to talk about.
So Governor Paterson, I'm James Flippin, the left versus the right. Maybe some final thoughts here. A question for the governor, I should say, about the mayor's race and some other issues as well. We're going to do that on the left versus the right. The left versus the right. I'm James Flippin. He's former governor of New York, David Paterson. So, Governor Paterson, we've been talking a lot about this mayor's race. I just want to give you the opportunity. A few days ago, you weren't really ready to do that. But at this point, are you calling on any candidates to drop out? Or is it more just about, hey, let's continuously think about paring things down over time? We've referenced September. Owner-operator John Catsimatidis has referenced September. Do you think that through the rest of July and through the rest of August, it's going to become more apparent? Or do you think that you're and other people like you are going to be saying continuously, let's get in a room, let's look at some numbers, let's compare finances, whatever it may be, and figure out who the best candidate is here in the sort of conservative Democrat realm?
I came to the conclusion after the press conference on Monday that no one was willing to embrace this concept right now. Mm-hmm. Not at all. A lot of people found the concept interesting, but they're not the people that were asking to get out of the race.
Right.
I have to say this. I think that September is a period where people's vote becomes consolidated. In other words, they look around, well, he was the governor for 11 years. I'm sure he could run the city. Or, well, he was a police officer in good standing. And then again, he had some problems, but Trump dropped the charges, so I don't think he really did anything wrong. In other words, you could mull over that over the summer. Mm-hmm. But I think that by the first week of September, people pretty much know who they're voting for. And that's why to take a second look at it, I don't know if I would even want to do that because I think people will be more entrenched at that time. I know that might have surprised you that I would say that.
No. So, I mean, is it fair to say that you think if this is going to happen, it has to happen now-ish? Like, sometime in the next week or maybe two?
It has to happen, I think, now-ish or certainly, by some point in August where people start to see it's not going to work out. But you're not right at this point going to say, okay, guess what? I, Governor Paterson, think it should actually be Walden and someone else who leave. You're not at this point going to say that. Well, I don't think Walden's vote tally is enough to make a difference if he leaves.
Okay.
I do think Curtis's tally will surprise people, but I think it will also surprise Curtis, and he'll stay in.
Right. And you've been sort of, I feel like as much as you are a natural foil and you guys have knocked heads on many a thing over the years, but you seem to be thinking that Curtis isn't going anywhere, and you don't even really seem to be suggesting that he should, it sounds like.
It's after years of trying to do this kind of thing, and he had no chance in 2021. Watching the way I've thought that he learned a lot.
Can I also ask you this? I think that and sometimes I get pushback, even from people on the right, even from Republicans, when I talk about this kind of stuff. I think there's a discrepancy between the way voters look at certain people and the way the politician class and the donor class look at certain people. And that was certainly true of President Trump. You had all these never Trumpers, a lot of people in the Republican Party who couldn't stand him, still can't stand him. And over time, that's sort of worn itself away because I think Trump has shown himself to be really serious and legitimate about the things that he cares about, right? Which, generally speaking, do fall under that kind of right of center political sphere. But do you think that it's fair to say there's a big discrepancy between the way some people look at Sliwa and then the way the voters might be looking at him?
Yeah, you look at him and he's got his Guardian Angels hat on and he's flopping around.
Like Trump with the orange skin and the bad hair. And
exactly. And, and he does this. And I think that there is an assessment that this person would never be the one standing up giving an inauguration speech at City Hall.
Because we expect the mayor to look a certain way and act a certain way and talk a certain way.
And now I did see him last week on an ABC TV show, and he did very well. And I thought that he gave very good accounting of himself. And, he and I have, crossed swords a number of times, but I think he and I also have, we're within 2 months the same age, and we kind of grew up watching the same things. And, I can throw a little something like from an old cartoon show out. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. So we have also our
You kind of speak the same cultural.
Yeah, we kind of speak the same cultural language. And, but back to, what would determine what the time would be when someone could get out. I just think that if somebody wasn't ready to do it now, by September, they would be more inculcated. They're just going to play it out, and I want to see myself lose.
Yeah, I mean,
and they will see it.
And I kind of think that that's, in a weird way, I maybe I don't want John Katzimatidis to be listening to this too closely, but I kind of feel like that's
whisper so he doesn't hear.
I kind of feel like that's what it should be at this point, right? I mean, it's unorthodox, it's kind of strange, it's sort of zany, it's definitely something that I think will be memorable. But what was it in Game of Thrones? It was like the War of the Five Kings or whatever. Like here, it's the election of the 5 mayors. You know what I mean? Like we don't know what's going to happen, and the simple fact that you have really polarizing differences between some of them, and then some of them are a lot more similar with their own little individual aspects or things that they consider important. It's kind of fascinating from a political perspective. I guess as like a political junkie, I almost just want to see what's going to happen.
Right, and at this point, with Mamdani leading in the polls, I would think you're going to need somebody who is a bit more of a moderate, who will pick up that vote and challenge him. Because if you have 2 moderates, which we have right now, I just think he walks right into Gracie Mansion.
And do you think that sort of on the margin, or like broadly speaking, is it just one of those things where the majority of the voters say, oh, there's the Democrat, well, that's who I vote for? Do you think that's where we are right now?
Yes,
or do you think it's changing?
There are a lot of people who stick to the party, and that's the party's candidate, and I don't blame them. One thing that I think is kind of interesting is that that has been the case in the past. It apparently can be the case now because of the plurality in which Mr. Mamdani won the primary. But, if I were one of the other candidates, I would go right at him. Like right now, they're fighting with each other.
Yeah.
If I were Eric Adams, I'd ignore Cuomo. I'd keep going after Mamdani. I'd throw a snowball at a window in his house, even though we don't have snow right now. But anything that would refocus everyone on what I stand for and what he stands for.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what's interesting about what's happening right now is all the while you have Adams and Cuomo kind of fighting with each other saying, you should leave. No, you should leave. Well, you should leave. And then sometimes kind of taking a pot shot at Curtis or taking a pot shot at Mamdani. Mamdani is maintaining a relatively low profile, or at least he kind of has been, maybe since that big victory on the primary night. And, Curtis is kind of also sort of keeping a somewhat low profile in the sense that he's letting this all play out because I think Mamdani and Sliwa have a natural position sort of at the polls, right? Like the political polls, either end of the spectrum. And then you got these other guys that are kind of jockeying for position in the meantime. So yeah, you're right. It would probably behoove them to just say, hey, I'm the guy. Doesn't matter who the rest of these people are. I'm the guy. And we'll see whether or not that's going to start to happen over the next week or two.
It's interesting because a number of these candidates are older than mayoral candidates usually would be. Andrew Cuomo is 67 years old. Adams, I believe, is about the same age. You can get to a point sometimes when maybe you'd like to do these things, but you don't have the energy. Because I'm telling you, and by the way, look at Trump. He's 79 years old. He's running around like a young colt.
Yeah. He's one of those weird guys, I think, who much like, they used to say Bill Clinton, like only had to sleep like 3 or 4 hours a night or something like that. Trump has to be that same kind of person from a physiology perspective.
By the way, James, because you said that, if I could say this real quickly, in 1980, the Democrats got beaten badly by Ronald Reagan.
Yes,
in 1984, Ronald Reagan beat Walter Mondale. He won every state except one state, and it wasn't even the state Mondale came from.
That's right.
And then in 1988, when finally Reagan leaves the stage, George Herbert Walker Bush comes out and he wins for president. So now 12 years we Democrats had suffered, and Bill Clinton said some things that he had said years before. No one listened to him. One of them was, the pain argument doesn't work. Stop talking about how bad conditions are for poor people and they live in these houses and all that kind of stuff. We've got to talk about how to put this country together from the top down. And amazingly, he wins the 1992 presidential election.
Yep.
I think one of the Democratic candidates, or one of the candidates who's running against Mamdani, who is the presumptive leader at this point, should start going after him about what he said. And yes, you can go after about what he said 5 years ago, but he'll save you the trouble. He says it now.
Yeah.
Go after him now. What are they doing?
Well, I think and this is just my own perception of it, Governor Paterson. This is the left versus the right. I'm James Flippin. My way of looking at it is the New York City Council is so far to the one side. They're totally in lockstep with the Mamdani campaign agenda. Albany, the state lawmakers up there, also in lockstep with that Mamdani approach. So it's hard for me to figure how these Adams and Cuomos of the world are supposed to suggest that they're going to go against his agenda and effectively find a way to thwart it. Because, you had even the, what was it, the UFT come out this week, the teachers union, and say that they're backing Mamdani. Why is that? Well, because Mamdani wants to take away mayoral control from the city schools. He wants to give it, he wants, in essence, the union to call the shots with the city schools, which, again, is right in line.
If he takes away mayoral control, it goes to who?
Well, it would, in essence, I guess, go back to
the city council?
Yeah.
Ooh.
And then in essence, you really don't have any control. You have no accountability. Guess what the union loves?
I get it.
A lack of accountability, because then you can just have bad teachers and no James, grades, and it doesn't matter.
Here's why, when you brought up Bill Clinton, why I think that's so important. Bill Clinton wasn't afraid to lose.
Right.
All those years that I was talking about when the Reagan kept winning, Bill Clinton, I think by 1984, had started trying to run for president. 1988, he made the longest and dumbest speech I ever heard in the history of public speaking. But he comes back.
Seriously? You're standing by that? The longest and dumbest you ever heard?
No, wait, there's probably some competition. There's probably definitely some competition. Give me a second here.
All right, it's in the top 10? It's in the top 10.
It's in the top 10.
Okay.
But by 1992, people came around to his point of view. If God forbid, if I came back and became a candidate again, that's how I would do it. I would just say what I think, and if you don't like it, you don't have to vote for me.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
It's an effective...
And you'll be surprised how even people who sometimes don't ideologically agree with you will still want to talk to you and will still want to vote for you, because at least you do have a plan, as opposed to trying to ingratiate yourselves to all different communities and all different types of dilemmas that you have when you're a candidate who's really controlled by the party as much, but less than being controlled by yourself.
Right. If you stand for everything, you stand for nothing, or you can't.
And Donald Trump, and this is now the second time I've said this, it's positive. Here on the left and the right, I'm supposed to be on the right, but Donald Trump did this in 2015.
Yes.
He didn't give a hoot,
Nope.
which was not the word I wanted to use,
Okay.
that and then he wins the presidency in 2016.
Yes, he did, Governor Paterson.
I
And it was
know.
a beautiful day.
I know.
All right, so we're almost out of time here. Just want to say one last thing here. We had all these other things that we potentially could have talked about. Are you excited about the fact that you no longer have to take your shoes off at the airport? Or were you somebody who had like the clear pre-check TSA, whatever, and you didn't even have to do that anymore?
Yes, I'm very happy.
Okay, you're happy about that.
Yes.
So you think the TSA is making a good move?
The TSA is becoming family friendly.
Yeah, family friendly. And hopefully there's less delays at the airport as a result. That would be nice. And also just if we could close on this, Governor Paterson, our Mets, they're killing me right now. I need this All-Star break so I don't have to scream at my TV every night.
James, if you and I went to Citi Field right now, they would have you pitch the first inning and me pitch the second inning, and 7 of the relief pitchers pitch. Can you get Sean Manaea back on the team?
Yeah, we need Manaea, we need Senga, we need some of these arms called up from AAA.
Exactly.
He's Governor Paterson, I'm James Flippin. The left versus the right on 77 WABC. Actually, it's on the network. The left versus the right on Red Apple Audio Networks.